Well, this is really a pleasure for me to come and have a chance to speak with you all. I feel in many ways like this is a hometown team here. Not all of you would know my background, but I spent 15, 17 years in business before moving into higher ed in large organizations, Gillette, Procter & Gamble, and then 3 different startups. Really the passion that I think I've brought to going inside the machine of higher ed, I think aligns with hopefully your interests, and I believe your interests, in saying where do we all as stakeholders in education take our role and think about where can we have influence. And obviously I think we all want the same thing, and I start with a healthy K-20 in Idaho, and ultimately the belief, I'm sure this is a favorable room, but that happening hopefully in other states will help us. And I got into this industry partly because of my perhaps idealistic, but I believe one that is one I get up every day and excited about, belief that education is a tremendous pathway towards empowerment and a tremendous pathway towards change. I don't know in this room, but I know that it was not more than 2 generations ago that I had first in family going to college, which in this state alone, I know our entering class at Boise State, 40% of the enrolled first-year class is first in family to go to college. So the social mobility, the skill set development potential is tremendous. That being said, I'd love to share with you a little bit of my thoughts on, if you'll humor me, my thoughts on higher education, what I think is going on in the industry, what I think are some of the issues are. A few of you have maybe heard me, and some of these remarks may have crossover appeal, but this industry moves so slow, it's still relevant, and it'll probably be relevant a year from now if you were to hear me again. But it's important to, I think, register there because it gives you a jumping off point into why the work of IBE, the work of the College of Innovation and Design, I think is both groundbreaking and has potential to be transformative. So the issue I see, higher ed is a model that's been built over decades, centuries. It is an industry that many layers of thoughtful design, almost as if you build a house one room at a time. There's a reason each room was built. The problem is when you're done and you look at the thing, you say, oh, this is not necessarily how I would have designed it if I had started from scratch or with a systems mindset. The idea of research juxtaposed to teaching, there's all different reasons why these things have occurred. But I do think that if I quickly fast forward to where I think we've been in the last 20 years, we're in a pendulum swing that the system hasn't really adapted to yet. And there's that I think drives the need for change. There are 2 variables that I think have happened in the last 20 years that higher ed has yet to really jump on and address. The first is affordability, and the second is the influence of technology in higher education. And when I say technology, I don't just mean delivering classroom learning through technology, because actually that train's already left the station. More than 1 in 4, if not higher, students today take classes online. What I'm really talking about is how technology is changing the bundle of goods that higher ed delivers. And I'll get into that in a moment. Let me start with affordability. We know that since '94, average tuition increases in higher ed have outstripped average household income gains by a factor of 2 to 1. So the percent of paycheck that higher ed is drawing from the average American family is significant. I was told by somebody a couple weeks ago that they went to Cal Berkeley, so I can't quote, but I think it was in '86, a semester at Cal Berkeley was $980. And the point on all that is that I think the social contract that we're creating with people today is much different, implicit in the price tag that we're charging. I would argue that when you went, or if this person went to Cal Berkeley in '86, hypothetically that person majored in whatever they wanted. I'm going to go sort of stereotypical from it. Maybe it was a liberal arts major, the person drives a cab in Berkeley. My belief that they're going to blame Berkeley or somehow ascribe negative value to their time at Berkeley I'll bet you would be lower than it would be today because of the debt burden. The perspective that I went to Berkeley and got put into a negative position because of the tuition I paid, or somehow the system didn't take care of me. I think it was much more a view of, I'm going to take self-agency in my learning, I'm choosing what I want to major, I've come out, I have a low, if any, debt burden. I maybe worked a summer job that paid that down. So now I'm pursuing whatever the next outcome is. I think it was decoupled from where we are today. I'll call out for you all, I keep this on my desk. August 2016, you don't always see Consumer Reports writing on education, but this illustrates this point. This is the cover of Consumer Reports. I kind of ruined my life by going to college. And the sad thing is it's not detailing the story of the for-profit higher ed. It's detailing very normal paths. The woman's quote here, Jackie from Portland, Oregon. Jackie went to 2 years of community college, something many people pursue either for affordability reasons or for the first step. Then she went on to get her nursing degree at University of Portland or Portland State, I forget which. Took a job as a nurse, and she can't carry the debt burden that she has. Now, that kind of a story is, I would argue, both an example and a clarion call to what we see, what I see is creating much more of more and more people, I believe, are bringing an economic rational mindset to their choice in education. This discussion is exempt from many of the colleges that many of you maybe have gone to, either in undergrad or grad school. Top 100 schools, top 50 schools, fundamentally deliver a bundle of things that all 5,950 other higher ed institutions in the United States, I think, are not able to completely deliver. And so all of a sudden, that economic rational mindset. So coming from Harvard, I don't think this would be something that Harvard keeps on their desk for a variety of reasons. There's a network effect that graduates have. I believe that philosophy major at Harvard still, if they are interested in pursuing make an investment banking career, they'll probably even get an interview through that network, preferential hiring, preferential relationships. Now that's, again, stereotypical, but it's not unheard of and not something that I've met many English majors from Harvard who are doing lots of business-related things. So that's one point on affordability. Technology is another story. I think you're seeing technology is becoming a facilitator for unbundling what your university delivers. If you think about it, what are some of the value or reasons people are going to college? We all maybe went in different priorities for different reasons, but I'd call out 3.5, 4 or 3, depending on how you view it. The first is knowledge acquisition. You're going to college presumably to learn, to study, to gain knowledge. The second, I would argue, is some form of a network. That was my point about places like a Harvard and versus very less selective schools where the network is there. The idea that it's a cohort that you're going to go through life with that may facilitate, it's the tribe, going through life with your tribe. Thirdly is a credential for employment. And this sort of fuzzy fourth is this belief that 4 years, 5 years in college is going to make me grow up faster than if I didn't do this experience. The idea that some parents and some students will say is, I just believe that it's a good thing to go through, it's personal development and other things. And what technology is doing is it's peeling off those 4. That's been a bundled suite that universities have sort of always delivered. And unfortunately, we've at times lost sight. We've been a house divided because you'll have some stakeholders who believe that it's all about knowledge acquisition. Or have prioritized that with disregard to the other side. I would argue most students, in fact the vast majority of students, if I had to rank order those, the first thing they're there for is knowledge. Knowledge? Anyone want to say credential? I would say credential for employment. And the simple test that I've told this story a few times, and I'll tell it again for those of you that haven't heard it, but Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, hits the college circuit. He's big on discussing his concerns in this industry, some of which, and a number of which might find favor in this room. But he was debating, I think it might, I believe it was Notre Dame's president, and he was discussing his concerns about higher ed, and the Notre Dame president had talked about that may be true, but that's not true at Notre Dame. It's such a special experience. It's an intense, wonderful place where enrichment and learning is occurring. Peter Thiel, smart guy, said, hey, I'm not going to doubt you, but would you be willing to run an experiment? It sounds like this is an amazing place. How about if starting next fall you announce you're not giving any diplomas? See how many kids are showing up for that amazing, rich experience for $55,000, $60,000 a year. And that, to me, is a litmus test of what the primary driver for most of our students is. And certainly, I would argue in our non-top, I'm going to expand it now, maybe non-top 200. And certainly, I would argue at a Boise State. So what technology is doing, and the potential of technology, is a lot of venture capital, and a lot of folks are saying, wait a minute, what are the most valuable parts of that bundle? And they've taken this credential for employment and said, wait a minute, we can find ways in which technology can facilitate delivering these credentials independent of both the time, 4 years it takes, and the cost. They're also looking at that hiring relationship, because if you think about universities, we've had kind of a lock on a relationship with hirers. It's almost like the the Catholicism going on, and now there's this Protestant Reformation that technology. Again, I'm using liberal arts examples to illustrate the point of economic value, but and again, I am a friend of liberal arts. I can talk about where I think that fits, but. Fundamentally, we're opening up access now to students to multiple pathways towards that employment, and technology is doing that. I'll give you examples. One is many of these you all know in this room, I'm sure, these coding boot camps, alternative ways to get credentials that get you employed. 13 weeks, 26 weeks, $35,000. The models are all over the map: Flatiron School, Galvanize, General Assembly. These are all players that operate, and many more. You can ultimately, you don't get a job in 90 days, we'll give you a portion of your tuition back, your jobs pay $75,000. Higher ed likes to step over and say, well, wait, that's not college. And they'll say, no, it's not. We're not pretending to be. We're just merely getting people into a position to be employed, and these jobs pay well. They may not look as beautiful as an architect's degree, but they're the equivalent of a draftsman, and there's a lot of people who need. And there's a number of roles out there that this training and this credentialing can offer. The second area that technology is addressing is this hiring pinch point, or this opportunity. It's a massive opportunity, and they're going after it hard. So Parchment, Degreed, Credly. If you go look at these sites, they're basically substitute credentialers for your skill sets, and they're basically saying we can present your competencies to employers. So the hottest job on campuses that really isn't, if you met many folks, is the registrar's office. Because fundamentally you ask, it's sort of classic Clay Christensen, what's the purpose of a registrar? If you ask the registrar, their view is I maintain the academic records of individual students, the integrity, we make sure they're right, we often serve as an input for reaccreditation, and that's our job. I would argue that universities should be in the line of work of presenting your graduates to employers in the next step of society, presenting their competencies and what they're able to do well. And we have fallen down on stepping into that role. So I would ask you, what is an A at Boise State's Engineering 302 class, and how does that compare to Wichita State's Engineering 501? By the way, did everybody get A's? What actually goes into the coursework and how challenging this is. And what Parchment, Degreed, and Credly do is they say, hey, send me your transcript, but also send me everything else you've done. You're an Eagle Scout, you've worked on a ranch, you've done internships at Micron or AgriBeef, tell me what you did. Now, some of this is black box algorithm, but they come up with competency scores, and Parchment has 1 million profiles. And they'll go to employers and say, hey, it's the most inefficient system in the world. You go to college campuses, you interview students, maybe even the students the universities require you to interview half the students you're interviewing. You don't even know that you didn't pick them because of the approach they take, which is, again, admirable, but extremely inefficient, the amount of time you have to spend out of the office. I have 1 million profiles. I'll deliver you 20 finalists, and who knows where they're coming from. They may be coming from Texas, from Arizona, not necessarily right here. So the efficiency, and again, this example should hopefully resonate, the efficiency with which technology can create markets and can all of a sudden now step into this in a more precise form than how we currently do it in our universities is a significant threat. And I do believe that the value of your time in university goes far beyond the credential. I don't believe that independent of the credential, your value is zero. And that's why I've chosen to step into the incumbent side of this industry and work for change. I also think that many of these upstarts, I'm thrilled to see them. I think it's a great thing. It's putting us into a position where we need to understand how we're going to be relevant and really self-examine what we do as an industry. I do believe it takes a long time, and if they're going to really have significant wide-scale impact, universities today put millions of people through the educational system. Now it's overall, I believe, a positive thing, and I don't believe that pipe of the disruptors is going to be that big. So I think the opportunity is with us today to try to address that. All of that story and this sort of illustrations is designed to set up that I believe that higher ed needs to be thinking about. I would argue we have to focus on being more outcome-centric. We are, I believe it's sort of healthcare, higher ed, and government are the last three to go through what I think many of you have already gone through in your businesses, which is understanding how we're going to get lean and nimble in a global world with technology facilitating the work we do, and learning how to really burn off the chaff and focus on what your core competencies are. And to that end, there have got to be mechanisms and ways in which we explore change. We have a very multi-stakeholder arena. There's no surprise why those three industries are probably last in line. There's a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of different players, and there's a lot at stake. But I do believe that the work of the College of Innovation and Design is a very interesting, it's a very unique mechanism that's been created. It drew me from Harvard to come here. It's not present in any university that I'm aware of. Universities are getting the drift that they've got to innovate, but this model, I would argue, is actually a very compelling one. So President Kustra and the State Board approved the creation of the College of Innovation and Design, I believe, in August of 14. Or somewhere in October, I'm not totally sure. But the thinking behind it, the original crafting of it, was this idea that there needs to be a mechanism that's empowered, that can conceive of and drive innovative models of teaching, learning, connecting to the community, and have that direct level of empowerment equivalent to our discipline-based college. The authority to create diplomas, to create learning certificates, or propose those and then administer them, which has been an issue, and I won't go deeper into that until later, but the College of Innovation and Design is a diploma-granting college akin to any other college you would find at Boise State, where we have but those are all discipline-based. Those are based in business, health sciences, education, engineering, arts and sciences, health sciences, if I said that. But our difference is and this is where my opportunity and where I get excited, is I had a chance to also come in and craft, and the thinking behind this model is we're not building around a discipline. Part of the issue is that there is, I mean this in the best possible sense, and I realize this is being filmed, so I've got to be triply careful, because I don't know, but there is a loyalty to your discipline that comes with our stakeholders, many of our faculty. Many of them, as they are developing their careers, there is a goal, like we all want to be, to have our work recognized, and it's often peer reviewed. So much of their work around research certainly, is to develop the recognition of the skill sets and competencies that they have. That often takes them into areas of research that are peer reviewed, that I would have called in my business days internal achievement awards. The ones that you sort of grant for recognition of terrific efforts and jobs well done that may not see the light of the bottom line. I recently was reading that I believe it's 98% of non-science research never gets cited once it's published. And only 45% of science-based research gets cited, which to me is a metric of adoption, recognition, and following through. I don't mean that as an indictment. I just mean it that we do have multiple things going on inside the university. And so the College of Innovation and Design is focused on saying we're gonna sort of pare this down, and we're going to not focus on building a discipline around innovation and design. In fact, Marty Schimpf, our provost, had said to me, here's the funding you have to hire X number of tenured faculty. And I said, I'll take the money, but I'm not hiring tenured faculty. I said, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a pool of funding. And I'm going to talk to any faculty member that we have on campus. And I'm going to say, any of you working across disciplines or ways in which the current structure or culture of the university is preventing you from identifying majors or certificates that has an eye towards employer needs, that also is a unique combination, we're willing to use that funding to sponsor and build up your idea. And we think there's some interesting academic experiences out there. We also look to the community and say, hey, great ideas come from everywhere. It doesn't have to come only from inside the house. So we're also going to have a component of our structure where we're saying, where are there outside collaborators that we partner with to infuse into student learning experiences that can focus on the outcome? Because again, we as an industry are focused on, today I would argue we focus on how to get you 120 credit hours, not how do we build competencies and outcomes that can lead you to conclude that your time and money spent was worth that time. That can often look like, in the simplest rubric for measurement of that, is your job and the kind of salary that comes with it. But I try to broaden the language because there are some very deliberate, focused pathways that individuals take that don't necessarily yield the monetary. There may be civic engagement they want to take. So I want to keep that broad. But this model is one where we partner with faculty and outside collaborators. The other component, I'd kind of reframe what we do, is almost like academic venture capital. We have, with very few LPs, the state of Idaho and Boise State University. And the idea is that the funding we have, we're making very discrete bets on where we think, if nurtured up and validated, we can create the opportunity to catalyze change inside this university and create a pathway where others like us in our type of university can follow and pursue that pathway. So a couple examples. We have stood up a new major in gaming and interactive media and mobile technology. It's basically the idea that virtual reality and skill sets that can contribute to building a world that's going to be technology enabled, Internet of Things, autonomous driving cars, you go down the list, training of nursing, of medical professionals, are two examples. Highly applied. Every student is coming out with a portfolio of real world experience. That curriculum is based on art, psychology, and computer science. And it's the idea that instead of just not only teaching the technical skills of how to code, let's say, you're also developing the narrative capability that comes from art and how to tell a story. You're understanding human behavior or human empathy with psychology. That kind of skill set, when combined, we think leads to, there's going to be more jobs needed in that space, and those are more empowered jobs. Presumably they come with better earnings. The second area that we think of is where do we combine, so that's unique because of, again, we're cutting across disciplines. Good luck finding your typical university where art, psychology, and computer science will talk. Everybody, the saying in most universities, everybody has the power of saying no, and very few people have the ability to say yes. And so those three groups, I would argue, again, would typically talk for a long time and argue over who gets half the curriculum. And that's a joke if you figure out the math, right? It's going to be a tough time doing that. That's one hypothesis. Where do we nurture development of new majors more rapidly, stand them up? That degree stood up in 12 months. That's extremely fast in higher ed to come up with that. We now have 200 freshmen and sophomores already, starting our second, when you stand it up, freshmen only, then it becomes freshmen and sophomores. Another hypothesis we're looking at is where can universities start to collaborate? We are phenomenal at reinventing the wheel. We're a cottage industry almost, akin to the hardware store or the dental office. And we create many things over and over on a belief that it's like that old FedEx ad. I love that commercial where there's the intern sitting at the executive table and he's saying, we've got to save money. We've got to save money. How are we going to do it? And all these senior executives are thinking, and the intern's like, we could use FedEx. And everyone doesn't acknowledge him, and the executive goes, CEO goes, I got it. Let's use FedEx. And he goes, well, I just said that. He goes, no, you went this way. I went that way. and again, in higher ed, I think we create similar models over and over and over, and we declare them very different and distinct. And that led me to, many of you are aware that we've announced we're the first university in the nation to partner with integrating Harvard Business School curriculum into Boise State and making that available to students. They take a 9 credit hour course. It's an immersion course in that you're taking all 9 credit hours in the same term. 8 of those are taught by Harvard Business School faculty online, and 1 is taught by a Boise State instructor where we're unpackaging what they're learning. Those students come out with 9 credit hours, which is 8% of your credit hours required for that diploma, so it's not an insignificant portion of your time. You also stand for and take and can earn a certificate of readiness from Harvard Business School. And it's only for the cost of 9 credit hours. There's no incremental cost for that. That's fascinating to this industry for a couple of reasons, one of which I just said. We don't collaborate. So the idea of taking world-class caliber content, I would argue, marrying it with a best-of-breed delivery vehicle in a way in which you can locally adapt and unpackage. Nobody's doing that. In fact, Harvard's very interested. I'm off to talk at Wharton on Monday because we go out now and talk to universities together saying this should not be inducing an immunological rejection response inside the university, and it does. And we had a lot of discussions inside Boise State. I will not mention who for obvious reasons, but at one of our meetings, fairly senior level, I had an individual say, I'm very concerned about this program. And I said, well, why? And they said, I'm concerned about dilution. And I said to myself, inside my head, I said, don't make me answer this question, because I think I know where you're coming from. What I said was, I think Harvard will work with us. And that's a joke, because if you understand the viewpoint that somehow they would be diluting our institution, suggests a myopic focus. Your typical university, and when I talk to Harvard about this, say, we're really thrilled you're doing this, because quite honestly, if I call North Texas State, if I call Wichita State, the standard answer is, well, I have somebody who teaches accounting. Why would I work with you guys? And the lack of vision, I would argue, about what that can open up. I would argue that this is an opportunity for our faculty who, if they were to be disrupted at an introductory accounting course level, nobody wins a Nobel Prize for this stuff. This is uniquely and exceptionally delivered, but it is basic information that gets people to a level of basic functionality. I would argue this ought to be freeing up your resources, these faculty, to consider research areas that might be more specific. I'm making it up, but what does accounting in an agricultural-based economy look like? What are areas where you can develop specialization and recognition that nobody at Harvard, or for that matter anywhere else, are focused on research? Our ability to get more comfortable with that. Now, what's nice about this, again, as a diploma-granting college is that program would often die in your average business school around the country because of the reason I just said. We can nurture that, grow it. We already have 30 people participating in our first cohort. That group will grow, and I guarantee you in 2 years, well, I 99.9% guarantee you, that we'll realize that had no harm. That actually is adding value. That's good. And very quickly, what will happen is we'll adopt it, which brings me to another point in our model, this academic venture capital model. I have no interest in holding on to the things that we nurture and stand up. Our goal is, once they're validated, I'm going to graduate them out and offer them up to my colleagues. So that gaming interactive media major, that'll be 400 students, 300 to 400 students. That is a profitable major. That will be a very attractive major for my colleagues, Amy Moll, or a Tony Rourke in arts and sciences. I'm going to leave it to them to decide, I've got 2 buyers here. Who's going to take it? And that opportunity, again, would gaming interactive media be actually started and nurtured in these colleges? I would argue that for a variety of reasons, some of which are understandable, no. But our ability to stand that up and then graduate it creates then more opportunity for us to step into the next wave of nurturing investments. So that model, to me, is one where it's a tremendous mechanism. Most other innovation models locate innovators inside a provost office, which has significant structural disadvantages. Provosts don't have nearly the ability to speak into and drive action. They're more informal influencers. Certain discipline-based colleges will have innovation-related positions, but often that's a recipe for suppressing the scale of the idea and conforming it back into the system. And so, and often you hit bunt singles in that environment, because that's about as much as the appetite for risk that conventional kind of discipline-based model supports. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't also say, I think we also think about where can we nurture the outside collaboration, where can we uniquely get together and combine, and that looks like a number of different areas, some of which we've talked with some of our largest employers about ways we can try to expand the learning of their employees that might facilitate the career growth, things that never even hit our registrar's office. Why does everything we do necessarily have to end up in academic credit on a transcript? Could we be more working in a parallel model where you earn credentials, badges, things that employers may recognize that facilitate their growth? We've also have an offering right now where we're very interested in seeing where employers may want to step into the idea of building up your competency of those employees who don't have BAs that could benefit from that learning and that skill set development. So we have an offering now that the tuition reimbursement model in most employers, I would argue, is underperforming, meaning it's undersubscribed, underutilized, and in some ways it's structurally deficient for the person without the bachelor's. Often those individuals have lower paying jobs in your organizations or in organizations around the state or region. The traditional tuition reimbursement model is you go take the course, you front the money, you get a grade of a certain standing, and we'll reimburse you. I've told the story before. I went into to one of the Jackson stores, and they prominently display their benefits on their door, and I'd walked in and I'd asked 4 different retail clerks, do you know of this tuition reimbursement program you have? I said, 2 or 3 of them had said, no, not really, or I don't want to take advantage of it. And one said, oh, it's the best deal ever. I said, really? Tell me about it. He said, oh, here's what I do. He goes, I take my classes and I take out student loans to pay for them. As soon as I'm done, I turn around and I submit for reimbursement. I get a check for like $1,500. It's like a bonus because I get to spend it like all in one swim. I thought to myself, oh, geez, you're like giving me more examples than I'm even trying to generate. Back to my Consumer Reports article. But I think the idea of maybe moving into a model where employers might consider pre-funded accounts of a small or medium size. We have ability to create right now a bachelor completion or a bachelor's degree from scratch that all happens online with concierge coaching, an infinite number of concentrations. And I'm certainly interested in saying, is that the kind of model employers in this state might find interesting to step into? I think the idea, the payoff is you reduce turnover. Many of these roles, I would argue, are often higher turnover roles. And if an individual is deliberate in pursuing that, that'll take them 4 or 5 years. But the pathway towards empowerment and then ultimately, hopefully, improving the pool of promotable talent. Many individuals, I think in my Walmart days, many of the stories of individuals who would work through that organization and go quite high. So with that, I would just say that I think that there are three areas that I would call out. By the way, how many of you are going to the Chamber of Commerce lunch today? Or President Custer is speaking. So consider me well, I'm not the warm-up act because I have the opportunity to speak to you all, but there will be a high degree of, I would bet you, I don't know exactly what he's going to be speaking on, but I'll bet you there is going to be a high degree of synergy between some of the remarks and ideas that I'm giving. But I think of 3 things that I'd love to leave you with around things that we're doing that immediately offer the chance to plug in and make a difference. But let me also call out a couple comments that I've observed when I think of the business community and university connection. And I think one is I wrestle personally with, because there is an eye towards employer needs I bring. I believe that we've got to stand for relevant education. That where we are in this pendulum, affordability, sort of back to my original opening points, where we are with affordability, where we are with technology, our industry has to focus more on owning the outcome with our graduates. And that's a culture change, but it's one that we have to try to drive towards. My college is laser focused on, at least with the initiatives we're standing up, demonstrating that and showing it doesn't have to be viewed as ideologically opposed to what has made our universities sort of develop over time. But with that, is my opportunities to speak with the business community. One of the things I think of is we are a large community, no different than when I talk to you with humor, hopefully, about talking to faculty. It's the Roman Senate. It's impossible to get 1,000 to 0 vote. It's similar with the business community. When I've been out talking to a number of our community here, I will often, it often has to do with where you are in your organization. The hiring managers, I get very tactical lists of things that are wanted. I want somebody, can you get me somebody who does blank? And it's very specific. And yet, and it's understandable, but often as I have an opportunity to speak with some of our more senior leaders, audience here, we'll often talk about the blend of our backgrounds and the love of our history major or our English major and how that served you so well in the work that you do today. I think that's not inconsistent, but it's interesting because your hiring managers aren't saying, hey, send me your English majors, send me your philosophy majors. And so, and when we've seen in our enrollments as well, which I think is more speaks to the economic rational mindset, but we've lost 40%, we've had a 40% decline in our history majors in the last 5 years at Boise State. And that's too bad. I would argue, I'm a product of liberal arts as well, but I think that stemming of that needs to occur. And one of the, I'll tell you right now, one of the things I'm doing, because I'm not for just shifting students into business and engineering. I love those need more to be fed, but fundamentally I do believe in the agility of thought that comes from the communication skills, the synthesizing that your typical English, hopefully your good English major would bring. But we're putting in place a number of courses that can add a veneer to individuals like that. They often have significant elective capabilities. So our ability to address the electives is a great playing field for my college to step in and say, I'm not trying to drive people out of liberal arts. We can grow that. But one is hiring needs. Two is, my businesses are just as scattered, I would argue, as universities at coalescing around a single big idea. The problem is our business is education, right? So we ought to think about how we're able to connect. And I do believe it's an impetus for us to be saying, where can we create doorways that can reduce some of that friction? But in fairness to everybody, it's not that easy, right? To get all of Micron, and you're all at different employers levels, but everybody to come around a single idea. It's just not how our organizations are designed. So sometimes that can create challenging discussions, because I know it's frustrating to work with universities at times, saying, where's the doorway? Who do I even talk to? And how do I even get these things done? There are lots of one-on-one initiatives. Those are great. They should continue. Faculty to employer, faculty to individual. I think the third thing I'd say is that we know that we need to be, I believe, and I think it's a special responsibility being the size that Boise State is, I'm now speaking from a Boise State perspective, to be located here in the Treasure Valley, physically present here. This is not San Francisco, LA, Boston, where the concentration of universities is high. You can shift and share that burden across many colleges and universities for feeding the demands and the needs of our economic engine here and our community. I love, and I think we need all of our universities to be firing on all cylinders. We have, the business side of me says we've got to be distinct and be different, be focused on what you do well, and amplify that, not necessarily try to, again, recreate the wheel on each other. But I do believe that Boise State, there is an eye towards trying to be responsive and saying, where are we as an enterprise university? What are the needs that you have? But it comes with a catch. The catch is, and I'd love to find this opportunity, is where could there be a new major, a new certificate, a new minor that could really drive your organization, or better yet, your organization plus others. I'd love to step into that with our employers, but it comes with a catch, which is I need you to step up with, do you want to sponsor that? Do you want to offer people from your organization to help teach it? We can coalesce, we can organize, I can also find and fill in faculty. But a lot of times I feel like we sometimes talk about, it's almost like the potluck dinner approach. Everyone says, let's all come together for dinner. And sometimes what happens is I feel like I get suggestions for ingredients. It'd be great if you cook my mother's salmon, or here's some cracked pepper from my friend. It'd be great if you use this, and it can be tough in this environment to say, really, that becomes more a recipe that others want you to cook. But we are extremely lean. We operate on we have the same enrollment as Harvard, and we operate on 1/10 of the budget. 400 million plus or minus, Harvard's 4 billion plus or minus. Same enrollment. Now that's a testament to the investment they can make, and that's great. I'm proud of the fact that I think how Boise State is able to operate and is able to focus on productivity for those 22,000 students. But I think that that's an opportunity, and certainly my college is a vehicle where we can be responsive. And I'm not meaning to leave out other colleges. I think there's great work going on in our other colleges. I just am not here to speak to all of it in depth. Amy Moll, Ken Peterson, Tony Rourke. There's a whole bunch of hot things. These honors colleges at universities are a whole nother discussion if you're ever interested in the higher ed landscape. But I think of three things that I can think of that I'll just leave us with. One is we've started cooperative education. We've started a cooperative education course in my college where today we are offering students, we've stepped into this with St. Luke's to start, and Simplot has picked up somebody. And I believe, Andy, I've talked with Shane, we're thinking about summer for Albertsons. But this is a big idea. It's not a new idea, it's new in its Treasure Valley embodiment. But it's the idea that we offer students credit for spending time in the employer and spending time in the classroom unpackaging that experience. And they're able to show what they can do, and employers have a terrific opportunity to try before they buy, is my short version of that. Yes, that happens in some of our university. That happens in our pre-professional majors today. Nursing, certain education, people do practicums. That functions. That's not, I'm talking about 6 in 10 students at Boise State, and I argue at most of our universities, are in what we call non-pre-professional majors. Think of that English major. This is a vehicle that can democratize access and showcase some of the skills that our students have who would not be open to your employer, that front screen I talked about. It's also of value to the employer because it offers the chance to more put out an open call and aggregate functional area needs and create the opportunity. So now St. Luke says this, we can take up to 40 students. Imagine if we can get our largest employers to partner, and where you can start to try before you buy. I see a world where we're putting 400, 500 students a semester out into these experiences. They get 3 credit hours, and the best part is they're learning while they do. This classroom environment, somebody saw someone get fired. Well, everyone else in the classroom didn't. Why don't we talk about that? What happened? Was it a surprise? Was it something that had been a long time coming? And by the way, warm-up activity. What's 5 things wrong with my outfit? Please don't answer that for me, but what's 5 things wrong with this outfit? Or the next class, 5-minute warm-up. What's wrong with this resume? You have these opportunities to drive a better development for individuals. So when they do show up, because I've spoken to a number of you, and the first thing I hear is, can you just get some of these students to even just spell their resume? Spelling right, it's crazy. And this vehicle can be an efficient clearinghouse that goes beyond the hub and spoke of faculty to, the nursing director to the nursing director at St. Luke's. The nursing director at St. Luke's is not interested in where they can distribute people throughout St. Luke's. They're interested in that direct pipe. Should keep it, but it's not the ultimate answer, and this model can do that. It happens in many other cities. I don't believe that we at Boise State, at least, have put that in place, and that's, to me, a large opportunity. That's one. Two, I'd love to think about ways in which we expand access for HBX. And this is almost a vehicle of rising the competencies, and I think have any of you listened to Malcolm Gladwell's podcasts at all? So have you read, I listened to his one about the educational philanthropy. Have any of you read that? So the quickest of versions is basically, he discusses that in 1991, 2, 3 was the first $100 million gift, philanthropy gift to higher ed. Since then, there have been 38 gifts. In sort of his view, as this led to an explosion of giving. The first gift went from an MIT grad to an absolutely unknown college in New Jersey, Glassboro State, I believe it is. The college had an endowment of $700,000, and it was focused on, I believe, engineering education. But what's interesting is Malcolm goes on to say that the remaining 38, effectively all of them went to top 20 schools. Not a single one went. And he then unbundles the idea that in higher ed, much like other complex systems, the question is, do you raise the capability of the weak link, or do you just double down on the strong link? And he quickly uses the example of air transit in the United States. If you were to try to solve the congestion and problem issues of air travel, would you double down and double the size of Denver's new international airport? Or would you actually try to address LaGuardia and Detroit's metro airport, the weak links in the system, to create that efficiency? And he's certainly a weak link person, discussing about the loss in the lesson of what that first gift was and what it can do. And I would argue that things like WorkU, HBX, our ability to democratize access, maintain affordability, can raise the basic capabilities. And I think we got a lot of problems in this world, and 5,000 grads out of Stanford and Harvard are not going to solve it. We need the capabilities from across our 50 states and our universities, and certainly within Idaho. And I think HBX, WorkU, so I think that could look like your employees. That could look like ways that you also think about raising the capabilities. We do take non-credit participants in HBX. And then I think also the opportunity here of advocating. The support that you're able to give models like CID, or see where Boise State can be a partner to the advocacy work you're doing. I would welcome the opportunity to try to be a partner in that and think about how could that model occur. The last thing is we both make this mistake, and I made this mistake at Gillette. I'll tell you an example. I was meeting with Jim Cook in Boston, the founder of Boston Beer. And I was talking about his innovation efforts, and he said, what's wrong with that, you academics, or something? I said, well, I'm not sure I'm an academic, but let's talk. And he says, well, I'm trying to brew I know that yeast, it's technically possible to make yeast that can brew a 30% ABV beer. Problem is yeast expends itself, and again, I'm not a brewer, so some of you may be, and that's as obvious, but he said, I went to the #1 yeast guy at MIT, the guys at MIT, and I said, hey, would you work with me? He goes, I will give you unlimited amounts to develop this yeast strain. And he said, this guy, all he did was, it's almost like he didn't hear me, and he wanted me to fund his research on zebra yeast in sub-Saharan Africa, some research in river delta yeast. And I said to him, you don't understand, you could be on like a Caribbean island. And he went back to the yeast, the zebra yeast. And my advice to Jim, as an aside, was you should have gone to the #2 guy at Wichita State and told him he can spend 10% of whatever you give him on whatever he wants. And that guy will be developing for you your yeast with as quickly as possible. But I think the point is that sometimes we get fully baked on our ideas, and I hope I'm not at risk of that, and I try to always stay adaptable. But to the extent we can formulate what could be the opportunity, but keep it adaptable and get each other at the table. We do the same thing in higher ed. I've met a number of people who say, oh, this is great, let's go talk to somebody in the community now about it. And it's sort of ossified. It's difficult to say, well, what if you changed it this way? Well, no, we get too far along. And so the idea of meeting each other earlier in that process for co-creation, I think, can be real opportunities. So with that, thank you. I probably went over, but I got excited. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity. And I would